Hi, Jen here, and thanks for stopping by today. Today I am sharing a few fun cards using the new stamp set called Kiss Off. And it's a super fun stamp set. It's got Not Today Cupid, Buy Your Own Chocolate, Kiss Off, Leave Me Alone, Love Stinks, and Valentine's Valentine, along with a bunch of smaller stamps. And I thought I would go ahead and just create some backgrounds using these small stamps. So I'm going to start the card off by creating some paper strips using different shades of pink, and I am just cutting these with my paper trimmer. I'm not measuring the size. I just wanted some varied sizes, and what I'm going to do with those is attach those to a piece of white cardstock and then use the bold alpha dies to create the sentiment for these cards, which is SWAK, or sealed with a kiss. And so I am just taking my fine line glue and gluing these down to the white cardstock, and then I'm going to set that aside to dry with an acrylic block on top of it. And the two cards that I created for this video are very similar, and so I'm just going to show the process for the one card. And like I said, they're very similar. The only difference is the mediums that I'm using really. And there's an additional product in the second one, and I'll let you know what that is. But the first thing I did was I took a piece of craft cardstock and prepped that with my embossing bag, and then I am going to use embossing ink to stamp the lips in a random pattern on that cardstock. And I am taking some white embossing powder and going over the cardstock. I always like to go over it twice with the embossing powder just to make sure it is fully covered and attached to that embossing ink. Then I had a few spots that the embossing powder had gotten on other areas, and I just took a brush and flicked those off. And once I've got the lips down, I'm going to take one of the bigger hearts in the stamp set, and then I'm going to take the smallest heart in the stamp set and kind of fill in a little bit of the empty space between the lips. And once again, I will take the white embossing powder and go over the images and then heat set that with my heat tool. And after I've melted the embossing powder on this panel with my heat tool, I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And I am grabbing the bold ABC die set using the letters SWAK, and I'm placing that over those strips of paper that I glued earlier. And then I ran that through my die cut machine to cut those letters out. And I really love the way that colored pencils look on craft cardstock, and I don't do it often, and so I thought it would be fun to use colored pencils on this card. And I started out with my white colored pencil, just going over all of the lips. And I use that white colored pencil to go over twice. And when I'm going over the lips, I'm just making really light circular motions to cover the area that I need colored. And then I'll go ahead and take a lighter or a light pink colored pencil and go over the entire lip, and then I will go over the corners and kind of the edges on the right and the left side where that fatter portion of the lip is with a darker color to give it a little more detail. I don't use colored pencils often. Most of the time it's used in conjunction with watercolors, and so this was a fun experiment for me. And I wanted to add a little bit of detail to the card, and so I made my own little envelope. And so I just took that same craft paper and cut a square and then rounded the corners and then cut a triangle for that top portion, and then layered a piece for the flap. I layered a piece of pink cardstock and then a piece of craft over that. And then I am taking some twine from my stash, and I will put a hole punch in the little envelope and run that string through that hole. And since I have that twine that's adding a little bit of bulk to the card panel, I am going to go ahead and add some very thin foam to the back just to pop it up a little bit. And so I will cut two pieces that go on the top and the bottom of the twine. And here on this back side, I had started out my card and I didn't like the layout of the lips, and so I just flipped it over and started all over again. I'm going to take some white acrylic paint, watered down a little bit, to add a little bit of white splatter all over the card. And that didn't give me the look that I wanted, so then I ended up taking a white paint pen and adding my own little dots just by dabbing that pen down. And then I'm going to use my tape runner to adhere that foam to the back of the card panel. And I trimmed this panel down a little bit, probably about 1/8 of an inch on the top and the side, just so that there's a small border on my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 white card base. And then I'll take some liquid glue to the back of that foam and add that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the letters. I should have used my T-ruler, but I just grabbed a strip of that a paper that I had left over and tried to line up these letters as straight as I could. And I am just using some liquid adhesive to add those letters. I also added a few sequins, and that finishes off this card. For the second card, I used pretty much the same layout. One of the differences is I use alcohol markers instead of colored pencils. For the SWAK letters, I used a stamp set called AlFaDoodles, but I did still use that same die set to cut out the AlFaDoodles. They don't go together, but they work together just fine. It just leaves a little bit of a white border around the letters. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did like it or find it informative, please go ahead and give a thumbs up. Don't forget, all links will be below to Whimsy as well as products used in this video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.